The private jet was already in the air when the first shudder hit. Not a gentle shake. Not turbulence. This was sharp, sudden, violent. The cabin lights flickered once, then steadied, as if nothing had happened. The engines kept, humming, smooth on the surface. Too smooth. The kind of calm that feels wrong when you've lived around danger long enough. Vincent Moretti felt it immediately. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He only tightened his grip around Elena's hand. Across from them, champagne glasses rattled softly on the tray table. Leather seats gleamed under warm light. Everything looked expensive, controlled, perfect. 30,000 feet above, the ground, the world below invisible, the sky outside endless and black. Elena smiled, unaware. She leaned closer to the window, watching the clouds slide past like slow-moving shadows. Her face carried that quiet happiness people get when they believe they're safe. When they believe nothing bad can touch them. Not today. Not with him. Vincent watched her instead of the sky. Most men looked powerful when they spoke. Vincent looked powerful when he stayed silent. His presence filled the cabin without effort. Dark suit, calm eyes. A man who had survived things no one ever wrote about. He had taken bullets. He had buried enemies. He had escaped traps designed to kill legends. But this was different. Another tremor rolled through the jet, stronger this time. The floor vibrated under their feet. A low metallic sound echoed through the cabin, like steel, being dragged too hard against itself. Somewhere near the cockpit, a warning tone chimed once, then stopped. The flight attendant froze for half a second. Just half, Vincent noticed. Elena didn't. She turned toward him, laughing softly, about to say something light. Something normal. Something that belonged to a world where planes didn't fall from the sky. Vincent lifted his hand slightly, not to interrupt her, to steady her. The jet dipped. Hard. Elena's breath caught as her body shifted against the seatbelt. Her smile vanished, replaced by confusion. Around them, loose items slid across the cabin floor. A glass tipped over, spilling liquid that rolled like silver toward the aisle. The engines changed pitch, higher, strained. Vincent's jaw tightened. He had heard that sound before. Not on a plane, but in cars, in buildings, in moments just before everything went wrong. It was the sound of control slipping away. Elena looked at him now, really looked. "Vincent?" she said quietly. He met her eyes. His expression didn't change, but his thumb pressed firmly against her, knuckles, grounding, protective. "I've got you," he said. "Not a promise. A fact." The jet shook again, longer this time. Overhead panels rattled. Somewhere behind them, a suitcase fell hard, bursting open. Shoes scattered across the aisle. The pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. Static, then silence. No reassurance. No instructions. That's when the fear began to spread. Elena's heart started pounding. She felt it in her chest, fast and uneven. The air inside the cabin felt thinner, sharper, like it was pulling at her lungs. She tried to laugh it off, tried to breathe normally. Vincent leaned closer, his shoulder pressed against hers, solid as stone. The plane dropped again. This time there was no mistaking it. Elena gasped as her stomach lifted, weightless for a terrifying second. Her fingers dug into Vincent's hand, not gently, instinctively. The cabin lights went out. Darkness swallowed them. For one frozen moment, there was only the sound of rushing air and the pounding of her heart. Then the emergency light snapped on, painting everything in red. Red seats, red shadows, red fear. Vincent stood up in one smooth motion, bracing himself against the seat as the jet lurched. He pulled Elena toward him, unbuckling her seatbelt with one hand. Outside the window, the clouds were gone. There was nothing but open sky, and the jet was falling into it. Minutes earlier, everything had looked perfect. The private jet cut smoothly through the sky, steady and confident, like it belonged there. The engines produced a low, constant hum, the kind that fades into the background, the kind people trust without thinking twice. Inside, the cabin felt more like a penthouse than an aircraft. Cream-colored leather seats curved around polished wood tables. Soft, golden lighting reflected off brushed metal panels. Everything was clean, balanced, designed to make people forget how far they were from the ground. Vincent Moretti sat comfortably in his seat, one arm resting casually on the armrest. He didn't need to lean back to look relaxed. He simply was. He wore a dark suit tailored so perfectly it looked like it had grown on him. No tie, no excess. Just control. The kind of control that came from years of owning every room he walked into. People feared Vincent not because he was loud, but because he never needed to be. Cities moved when he decided they would. Deals closed before words were finished. Problems disappeared without explanation. His power wasn't announced. It was understood. Across from him, Elena watched the world pass outside the window. She pressed her forehead lightly against the glass, smiling as clouds stretched endlessly below them. From up here, everything felt smaller, distant, like problems couldn't reach them. She turned back toward Vincent, her eyes bright. She felt safe. That feeling wasn't new. It had grown slowly, over time. In the way he always stood between her and danger. In how he listened more than he spoke. In the quiet certainty of a man who never made promises he couldn't keep. Elena trusted him. She always had. Vincent glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. Not a smile meant for anyone else, just for her. He reached out and took her hand. His grip wasn't possessive. It wasn't showy. It was steady, warm, protective in a way that didn't need explanation. Elena's fingers curled naturally into his. Outside, the sky stretched on forever. No land in sight. No signs of the world below. Just clouds, and distance and the illusion that nothing could touch them. A flight attendant moved quietly through the aisle, offering drinks with practiced ease. The cabin smelled faintly of leather and clean air. Everything felt calm. Controlled. Too controlled. Vincent's eyes drifted briefly toward the cockpit door. It was closed, as always. Secure. But something about the silence felt off. Not wrong, just different. He didn't react, not yet. Elena leaned closer, resting her shoulder lightly against his arm. She felt the strength there, solid and unyielding. Being close to him made the world feel slower, quieter. She exhaled, relaxed. For a moment, Vincent allowed himself to do the same. This flight was meant to be simple, a break from chaos, a short escape above the noise, above the threats, above the constant tension of his world. Just him, just her, just the sky. The engines continued their smooth rhythm. Then, barely noticeable, the sound shifted, a subtle change in pitch, so slight most people would never hear it. Vincent did. His fingers tightened around Elena's hand. Not enough for her to notice, just enough for him to feel grounded. Outside the window, the endless sky remained unchanged. For now, Vincent reached for her hand. Not to impress her, not to reassure anyone watching. He reached for her because instinct told him to. Because when the world shifted, even slightly, his first move was always to secure what mattered most. Elena felt his fingers wrap around hers and smiled without looking at him. His touch had that effect on her. It slowed her breathing, quieted the noise in her head, made everything feel balanced again. She leaned closer, her shoulder resting fully against his arm now. She felt safe. With Vincent, danger usually stayed far away. Not because it didn't exist, but because he always stood between it and her. He had a way of making threats disappear before they ever reached her door. A way of carrying weight without letting it crush the people he loved. Elena trusted that without question. The jet continued forward, slicing through the sky with smooth confidence. Outside the window, clouds rolled past like soft white waves. Sunlight filtered in at an angle, painting the cabin in warm gold. For a moment it felt timeless, untouchable. Vincent stared ahead, his expression calm, unreadable. Years of survival had taught him to read rooms, faces, and silences. He noticed patterns most people ignored. He felt shifts others brushed off. The engines were still humming, but not the same way. The change was subtle, almost invisible. A fraction off, a note held too long, then tightened. Pilots trained for years to recognize that sound. Passengers never did. Elena didn't hear it. She traced a slow circle on the back of Vincent's hand with her thumb, absent-minded, relaxed. Her thoughts were far from the sky, far from the ground below. She was thinking about dinner, plans, about where they'd go next, about how strange it felt to be happy in moments like this. Vincent's thumb stilled. He tilted his head slightly, listening. Not with his ears, but with experience, with memory, with the quiet awareness of someone who had survived too many close calls to ignore the small signs. His gaze flicked once toward the ceiling panels, then toward the aisle. Everything looked normal, too normal. The cabin remained peaceful. No alarms, no flashing lights, no raised voices. That's what made it dangerous. Elena glanced at him, noticing the shift in his focus. "What is it?" she asked softly. Vincent didn't answer right away. He squeezed her hand once. "Nothing," he said. His voice was steady, calm, convincing. And for a second, he almost believed it. The flight attendant passed by again, her movements smooth, practiced. She smiled politely. The kind of smile worn by someone trained to project calm no matter what. Vincent watched her closely. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before continuing down the aisle. Another small detail. Another mark added to the quiet list forming in his mind. Elena turned back toward the window, unaware. She rested her head lightly against the seat, eyes half closed. The gentle vibration of the jet lulled her, like a heartbeat she could trust. Vincent shifted in his seat, subtly positioning himself closer to her. Protective, grounded, ready. The sound from the engines shifted again. This time it didn't settle. A faint vibration traveled through the floor, up the legs of the seats. So light it could be mistaken for imagination. So brief it could be ignored. Vincent didn't ignore it. His jaw tightened. His grip around Elena's hand grew firmer, not enough to alarm her, but enough to anchor her to him. Outside, the sky remained endless, beautiful, unaware. Inside, something had begun to change. And neither of them, not Vincent, not Elena, knew how little time they had before the silence broke. A warning light blinked in the cockpit. Just once, amber, brief, easy to miss. Then it vanished, as if it had never been there at all. The jet continued forward, smooth and steady, cutting through the sky without hesitation. To anyone watching from the cabin, nothing had changed. The engines still sounded strong. The altitude remained constant. The illusion of control held firm. But inside the cockpit, the co-pilot froze. Only for a moment. His eyes flicked from the instrument panel to the captain, then back again. His hand hovered over a switch, uncertain. The numbers stabilized, but not cleanly. Not the way they should. Vincent saw the hesitation through the open crack of the cockpit door. Most passengers wouldn't have noticed. Most people never looked forward long enough to catch the details. But Vincent had learned long ago that danger announced itself in fragments, in pauses, in glances, in moments people tried to hide. He didn't ask questions. He didn't stand up. He didn't draw attention. He simply squeezed Elena's hand once. Firm and certain, a silent promise. Elena looked at him, slightly surprised by the pressure. She searched his face, expecting to see concern, or tension, or at least curiosity. She saw none of it. Vincent's expression was calm, controlled. The same face he wore in rooms filled with enemies. The same face that had saved his life more times than he could count. Elena relaxed again, trusting that if something were wrong, he would already be dealing with it. She always trusted him. The flight attendant returned to her seat, fastening her harness with deliberate care. Her movements were still smooth, but faster now. More precise. Like someone following a checklist she hoped she wouldn't need. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the jet adjusted power. Outside the window, clouds thinned, revealing a stretch of clear blue sky. From this angle, everything looked peaceful, almost unreal. Vincent shifted his weight subtly, planting his feet more firmly on the floor. A habit he couldn't unlearn. He glanced at the emergency exits, counted rows, noted positions. Preparation came naturally to him. Elena leaned back in her seat, exhaling softly. She didn't notice the way the hum of the engines held a fraction too long before settling. She didn't feel the faint vibration beneath her feet. She only felt Vincent's hand in hers, warm, solid, unmoving. In the cockpit, the co-pilot cleared his throat. The captain nodded once, eyes still locked on the instruments. Another system check ran. Numbers updated, readings adjusted. Still no alarm, still no explanation. The warning light did not return, but that almost made it worse. Vincent's gaze drifted forward again. He caught the captain's reflection in the glass, the tight line of his jaw, the way his shoulders remained tense instead of relaxed. Another sign. Vincent had built an empire by trusting patterns, not hope. He knew when a situation was, pretending to be stable. He knew the difference between calm and denial. But there was nothing to confront yet, nothing to fight. So he waited. The jet kept moving forward, engines pushing them higher, faster, deeper into open air. Miles of sky stretched ahead, indifferent to plans, immune to power. Vincent leaned closer to Elena, lowering his head slightly. She turned toward him, her eyes soft, questioning. He didn't explain. He didn't warn her. He simply rested his forehead lightly against hers for a brief second. A quiet moment, a grounding one. Then he sat back, his grip still firm around her hand. Outside, the horizon looked endless. Inside, fate had already begun to turn. Quietly, patiently, without asking permission, and the jet flew on, unaware that it had crossed a line it could never fly back from. The first jolt hit without warning. Drinks on the small table between them leapt into the air, crystal tumbling like frozen raindrops before shattering across the polished floor. The soft hum of the engines warped into a jagged roar. The jet dropped again, harder this time. The leather beneath Vincent's hand vibrated violently. Elena's hair whipped against her face as the cabin lurched, each movement twisting the small enclosed space like a storm trapped inside metal. Oxygen masks fell from the ceiling, swinging back and forth with terrifying speed. The metal fittings rattled against the panels, clanging like distant thunder. The soft hum of the cabin lights seemed to warp, flickering in sync with the shuddering plane. Wind howled through the small gap of a panel near the rear, pushing against Elena's shoulder. The sound was deafening, almost alive, a reminder that at 30,000 feet, the world outside had no mercy, no rules, no concern for comfort. Elena gasped sharply, not from fear, not yet. From shock, from the impossibility of the moment, from the realization that this plane, their escape, their private sanctuary, was tearing itself apart in front of her eyes. Vincent tightened his grip on her hand, not lightly, not politely. He anchored her to him, an unyielding tether against the chaos. His body braced against the tilt of the cabin, each movement calculated, precise, instinctive. A second stronger jolt rattled the jet. Drink spilled further, and the shards of glass scattered. Under the metal frame of their seats, panels groaned. The small table between them tilted violently. Vincent used his forearm to hold it steady, his other hand never letting go of hers. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She pressed herself closer to him, instinctively seeking the grounding only his presence could provide. The jet lurched again, twisting in the sky as if the air itself had become liquid and tossed them in, its waves. Outside the window, clouds blurred past in violent streaks of white and gray. Indifferent to the chaos inside, Vincent's eyes were focused, calm, predatory. Nothing in his posture betrayed the storm. Outside, every muscle was taut, coiled, ready for the next sudden drop. Elena's fingers dug into his. She felt the strength behind the grip, the promise behind the silent message. I will not let you go. Another jolt threw the small table fully onto its side. Wine sloshed across the floorboards, leaving dark streaks against the polished surface. One shard of glass nearly cut Vincent's palm, but he barely flinched. His focus never wavered from Elena. The jet shuddered violently again, almost as if it were trying to flip them upside down. Elena's stomach lifted, weightless, and a sharp, hollow rush of air hit her lungs. Vincent leaned into her, his body a wall against the chaos, a shield against the wind and the forces trying to tear them apart. He adjusted his footing, bracing against the floor, the wall, anything solid, keeping her close, keeping her alive. Elena looked up at him wide-eyed, her gasp finally caught between shock and awe. She realized the truth in a single terrifying moment. He wasn't just holding her hand. He was holding her life. The jet dropped once more. Violently, and the world outside the window blurred into streaks of blue and white. But inside, Vincent's grip never faltered. Not for a second. And Elena understood. Survival didn't come from the engines, the wings, or the metal around them. It came from him. And he would not let go. The jet pitched sharply, throwing everything inside into violent motion. Metal groaned under stress, panels rattling like dry bones. The floor tilted beneath Vincent's boots, threatening to throw him off balance. But he moved with the craft, solid, precise, predator in motion. Every step, every adjustment was calculated, instinctive. Elena clung to him, breath rapid and shallow, chest rising and falling with each violent jolt. Each tremor pressed her closer into him, each vibration rattling her core, but his presence grounded her. A single touch, a steady hand, the certainty that he would not falter. The engines screamed. Their smooth, steady hum had warped into a high-pitched shriek, a beast straining against its metal cage. The cabin vibrated with it, alive with violence. Walls shuddered, small panels rattled against their hinges, and the soft cabin lights fractured, flickering across the ceiling like strobe flashes in slow motion. A panel in the rear suddenly burst open under pressure, sending a rush of air that hit Elena with brutal force. Her hair whipped into her face. She gasped sharply as the wind clawed at her, tearing at her clothes, slamming her into Vincent. His hand never loosened, never faltered. He leaned into her, pressing her against him as his free arm braced against the wall, every muscle coiled to hold her steady. The plane lurched violently again, dropping hard enough to lift them off the floor for a fraction of a second. Elena felt weightless, suspended in midair, and then gravity slammed her down, against him. She clung instinctively, nails biting into his palm, lungs struggling to draw air, against the rush of wind that surged through the cabin. Vincent's jaw clenched. He could feel the metal flex beneath him, the craft's very bones rebelling against the sky. Each movement he made was a calculated counterbalance, a fight against physics itself. Every step, every tilt, every angle had to anticipate the jet's violent shifts. Before they happened, a single miscalculation would cost them everything. Elena's pulse raced. She realized starkly that her life was entirely tethered to his will. One slip, one misjudgment, 1 second of hesitation, and the open sky would claim her. He tightened his grip, not gently, not possessively, but with deliberate purpose. A strength born from a lifetime of controlling chaos, a power that had forged him into the man capable of bending the world to his will. She felt it in her bones, grounding her even as the world outside threatened to tear them apart. The wind screamed again through the torn panel, shrieking as though it carried death itself. It ripped at her hair and clothes, tugged at her body, but she pressed closer to Vincent, instinctively seeking the safety that only his presence provided. He leaned further into her, bracing, anchoring them both against the unpredictable motion of the jet. The cabin lurched to the side. The walls creaked, bending slightly under the strain. Small items slid across the floor with a metallic clang. Tables rattled violently. The soft hum of the engines had become a mechanical growl, an animal straining against its cage, and the lights overhead flickered with every violent twist. Outside, the clouds churned and twisted like molten white fire, oblivious to the struggle inside. The endless sky stretched on, beautiful and merciless, indifferent to the chaos within the small cabin. Inside, there were only 2 constants, Vincent and Elena. One hand held hers, an unyielding tether. One shoulder shielded her from the wind. One heartbeat matched hers, steady, unwavering, and the tension refused to break. The jet pitched, rolled, twisted, The walls groaned. The air shrieked. But Vincent did not falter. He would not falter, and Elena knew, with an unshakable certainty, that as long as she held his hand, she would survive this storm. The open sky might try to take them. The plane might rebel, but inside this cabin, in the chaos and the violence, one truth remained. Vincent Moretti would not let go. A subtle crack ran through the cabin frame, almost imperceptible. A faint whisper of metal under strain. Vincent noticed instantly. Years of reading danger in the smallest details had trained him to catch the uncatchable, the split second before disaster arrived. The jet tilted sharply, violently, throwing the cabin into chaos. Elena's body lifted from the seat. Not completely, but enough to make his blood spike. He reacted before her mind even registered the danger. His free hand shot out, gripping her wrist with iron precision. The wind from the rear panel tore at her body, tugging and ripping with unrelenting force. It threatened to pull her out into the endless void beyond the small cabin. Vincent's muscles screamed in protest. Every fiber of his being coiled like a spring, every nerve on high alert. The strain was immense, but his hand on hers remained firm, unyielding. The single thread connecting them was the line between life and death. The metal beneath them groaned ominously, tiny fissures appearing along the frame with sharp, alarming clarity. The jet twisted again violently, and Elena's body lurched toward the open void. Her hair whipped across her face in a storm of chaos. The wind screamed around them, a living, merciless entity, clawing and tearing. Vincent tightened instantly, pulling her closer, anchoring her against him. The pressure in his grip was firm, precise, a silent promise, I will not let go. He glanced at the broken panel, at the gaping maw of the sky beyond. Endless, beautiful, deadly. Every second, it seemed, the distance to the void shrank, each gust of wind a predator. Elena's breath came in short, sharp gasps, but she did not speak. No words could explain the terror. She didn't need to. Vincent knew. He always knew. He felt it in the pull of her body, in the tremble of her fingers, in the way her weight threatened to leave him. One hand on her wrist, one hand holding hers, one anchor against the sky. That was all that stood between life and oblivion. The jet shuddered violently. Lights flickered overhead, throwing the cabin into brief, strobe-like flashes of red and white. Panels rattled. The walls groaned under pressure. The small table tipped sideways, sliding with a metallic clang. Vincent shifted his weight, bracing against the cabin wall. His legs burned as he planted them. Against the floor, his body twisting with the rhythm of the jet, countering every force trying to drag Elena out. He moved as one with the chaos, coiled and ready, a predator fighting the storm. Velina pressed into him instinctively. The wind clawed at her hair, tugged at her clothes, and tried to pry her away. But she was tethered by more than physics. She was tethered to him. Every second stretched into an eternity. Time seemed to slow, the roar of the wind and the creaking metal fading into a singular focus. Hold her, keep her, do not let go. A violent gust tore through the open panel, threatening to wrench her arm from his grip. Her body swung outward, testing his hold, but Vincent's fingers dug in deeper. Pain lanced through his forearm, burning, muscles straining, but he refused to falter. Elena's fingers trembled in his, not from fear, at least not entirely, but from the raw edge of life itself, from the impossible knowledge that survival depended on a single, unbroken thread. One slip, 1 second, one failure. That was all it would take. Vincent pressed closer, chest against her back, jaw clenched, heart pounding in tandem with the jet's violent rhythm. He felt every shift in her weight, every pull of the wind, every groan of metal threatening to betray them. And yet, through it all, through the chaos, the fear, and the relentless assault of the sky, one truth remained. He would not let go. Elena knew it. She didn't need to look at him, didn't need to speak. One hand, one grip, one tether. Her life, her world, rested entirely in his hands. And he held it. The jet shuddered violently, a groan of tortured metal reverberating through the small cabin. Every panel, every seam, every bolt trembled under the strain, warning of collapse. Vincent's grip on Elena tightened instantly. Not too hard, not possessively, purposefully. Each finger locked into hers like an anchor in a storm, tethering her to life. The rear panel, already compromised, creaked and warped further, a jagged gap forming that revealed the endless, indifferent sky outside. Blue and white streaks of clouds twisted into chaos, beautiful and merciless. One misstep, one gust, and the void would claim them. The jet lurched again, hard enough to lift them partially from the floor. Elena's chest pressed against Vincent, her hair whipping violently around her face. She tried to catch her breath, but the wind tore at her lungs, stole her voice. Vincent shifted his weight instinctively, planting his boots firmly against the floor, one shoulder, bracing against the wall. His free arm adjusted, protecting her body from the open void, countering every unpredictable motion of the plane. Every movement was survival, calculated, precise, unrelenting. The emergency lights flickered red and white, casting the cabin into violent staccato flashes. The polished floor reflected streaks of light as the metal twisted under stress. The small table, between them, tipped once more, sliding with a metallic clang, bottles rattling against its frame. Wind howled through the torn panel, whipping into the cabin like a living force. It tugged at Elena's clothing, clawed at her hair, tested Vincent's grip with every gust. She pressed against him instinctively, trusting the man who had always been her anchor in a chaotic world. The jet tilted violently to the side. Gravity pressed against them differently this time. Elena felt weightless for a terrifying instant, then slammed against him. Vincent adjusted instantly, moving with the craft, countering the pull, the tilt, the forces that would tear her from his grasp. A small fissure appeared along the frame near the torn panel. Metal bent and flexed dangerously. The rear of the cabin shuddered as if protesting, threatening to give way entirely. Vincent felt it, the subtle shift that signaled a point of no return. His jaw tightened. Eyes locked on the jagged gap behind them. He leaned further into Elena, chest to her back, shielding her from the wind. His hands never moved from hers, never let go. Even as the floor tilted again, sending a jolt through his entire body, Elena's breath caught. Fear mixed with adrenaline, pressing hot against her chest. Her fingers trembled in his. Her pulse raced, syncing with the violent rhythm of the plane and the steady beat of Vincent's heart against her back. One side of the cabin groaned under pressure. A panel buckled, forcing them closer together. The wind screamed through the open space, a relentless, icy force that seemed intent on ripping them apart. Vincent's grip tightened just enough to anchor her. Every muscle coiled, every movement precise, countering physics itself. He could feel the metal's rebellion beneath him, the cabin, bending and twisting like it might tear apart at any moment. Outside, the sky remained beautiful, cruelly serene, oblivious to the struggle inside. Inside, there were only two constants, Vincent and Elena, tethered together by sheer will, by instinct, by the unspoken promise that he would not let go. Every second stretched like eternity. Every vibration of the cabin tested them. The rear panel threatened to fail completely, and the point of no return loomed. Vincent pressed closer, chest to her back, holding her with absolute certainty. Her life rested entirely in his hands, and he would not, could not, let go. The storm inside the jet was relentless. The void outside waited patiently, and in the center of it all, one truth remained. Survival demanded absolute focus, and Vincent Moretti would give everything to keep her from falling into the endless sky. The rear panel screamed under pressure, bending violently with every gust of wind. Small cracks raced along its frame, jagged lines slicing through metal like lightning bolts frozen in place. The gap widened, revealing the endless sky beyond. Indifferent, cruel, and waiting. Elena's body shifted dangerously toward the opening. Her legs swung in the turbulent air, her fingers scraping against the edge of the torn panel. The wind ripped at her hair and clothes, pulling her toward the void with merciless force. Vincent reacted instantly. One arm shot out, gripping her wrist with a forceful iron hold. The other stayed locked around her hand, the single thread keeping her tethered to life. "Hold on!" He didn't shout. It wasn't necessary. She didn't need words. Her fingers trembled in his grasp. Her chest pressed against him, heart pounding in rhythm with the violent motion of the jet. The cabin tilted again. The floor beneath them shifted unpredictably, threatening to throw them both into the open sky. Panels groaned and buckled. The small table between them toppled, rolling violently across the cabin, bottles clanging against each other. Wind blasted through the gaping panel, tearing at Elena's hair, whipping it across her face. It tore at her clothes, pulling at her with the strength of a living force. She gasped sharply, her lungs burning, but she did not scream. She could not. Her survival depended entirely on the man holding her. Vincent braced his legs against the floor, every muscle tensed, coiled like a spring ready to absorb the chaos of physics. His body became the wall between her and the endless drop beyond. Every movement, every adjustment was precise, instinctive. A battle against the storm. Another violent lurch. Elena's weight swung outward, and for a terrifying instant she was suspended, nearly free of the cabin's confines. Her fingers slid slightly in Vincent's grip. Slip 1 second. Everything would be lost. Vincent tightened instantly, squeezing just enough to anchor her without causing her pain. His shoulder pressed against her, chest to back, shielding her from the gaping void. The force of the wind against them was brutal, but his body absorbed it, transferring stability into her trembling frame. Outside, the sky was serene, deceptively calm. Clouds drifted in slow, indifferent patterns, mocking the chaos inside. The endless blue waited, patient, beautiful, deadly. Elena's breath caught again. Panic threatened to rise, but Vincent's presence crushed it before it could form. One hand held hers. One held her wrist. One anchor against oblivion. That was all that stood between her and the infinite drop below. The jet twisted violently, the rear panel groaning as though it might tear completely away. Shards of metal and paneling rattled under pressure, sharp edges catching the light of the emergency strobes. Wind screamed through the gap, ripping at the cabin with a force that seemed designed to test the limits of survival. Vincent leaned into her, every sinew engaged, every nerve on high alert. He countered the pull of the wind, the tilt of the plane, the unpredictability of the failing metal. His grip was absolute, unwavering, immovable. Elena's chest pressed against his back. Her eyes widened, her fingers trembling in his hand. She realized in a heartbeat what survival meant. Complete trust. One hand, one heartbeat, one man holding her against the sky. And Vincent Moretti could not, let go. The rear panel creaked violently once more, and Elena's body tilted closer to the edge. She gasped again, wind tearing at her lungs. Time slowed, the seconds stretching into eternity. Vincent's eyes locked on hers. No words, no hesitation, just raw certainty. One grip, one anchor, one tether between life and the merciless void. She was slipping, and he was holding her. The storm, the wind, the endless sky, all of it pressed against them. But inside the jet, in the eye of chaos, one truth remained. He would never let her fall. The wind still screamed through the torn rear panel, but Vincent had Elena pressed firmly against him, her chest to his, her trembling fingers locked in his. The storm outside was relentless, but inside, one truth remained unbroken. She was alive because of him. He shifted his weight, adjusting to the violent tilt of the jet, bracing his boots against the floor. Every movement was calculated, precise, a battle against gravity and chaos. The aircraft groaned beneath them, metal protesting. But Vincent ignored it. His focus was singular. Keep her safe. Elena's breath came in quick, ragged bursts, but she no longer gasped with the same raw shock. Her eyes found his back, felt the strength coiled there like steel, the absolute certainty that he would not let go. And in that moment, A fragile calm settled over her heart, despite the chaos around them. The jet shuddered violently again, panels rattling, the rear frame twisting under stress. Vincent leaned further, coiling his body like a spring, countering every force that threatened to tear them apart. One hand stayed locked on hers. The other gripped her waist, pulling her fully into his chest. He became both shield and anchor, immovable against the storm. Outside, clouds churned violently, the endless blue sky streaked with white, cruelly serene, a reminder of the peril they had narrowly avoided. But Vincent did not look at the sky. His eyes scanned the jet's interior, noting every fracture, every weakened panel, every wobble. Each detail mattered. Each adjustment could mean the difference between life and death. Another violent tilt shook the cabin. Elena instinctively pressed closer, nuzzling her cheek against his chest. The rhythm of his heartbeat pulsed through her, steady, grounding, a reminder that she was tethered to life. Vincent's jaw tightened. He felt the subtle shifts in the jet, the way metal flexed and creaked, under strain. Slowly, carefully, he repositioned them, using his body to redistribute weight, counteract the pull of the wind, and stabilize both of them. His movements were deliberate, almost surgical. Years of control, precision, and survival distilled into a single desperate effort. Elena's fingers relaxed slightly in his grip. She pressed against him, trusting entirely. She didn't need to speak. The storm was still out there, but he was here, and he had her. The rear panel buckled once more, but Vincent's free hand found a support, bracing firmly against the cabin wall. Slowly, painstakingly, he eased them both back from the opening, positioning her safely against his side. The wind tore at them, but he did not falter. The jet shuddered again, violently, but the immediate danger had lessened. Elena's body still trembled, but she was upright, grounded, secure against him. Vincent's eyes never left the compromised panel, noting every tiny shift, every sign of instability. He exhaled slowly, finally, letting some of the tension drain from his muscles. One hand stayed locked with hers, a tether that said more than words ever could. She was alive. He had not let go. Elena's chest pressed against his back. Her eyes found his shoulder, her lips parted slightly, the breath catching that came from pure relief and exhaustion. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She was safe. The jet continued to groan under the strain, but the worst had passed. Outside, the clouds still roiled. But inside the cabin, there was a moment of fragile stillness. Vincent tightened his grip slightly, a subtle reminder. She didn't move. She didn't need to. One anchor, one tether, one promise held them both. And in that suspended silence, amidst the chaos and the storm, one truth remained unshakable. He would never let her fall. The jet shuddered violently one last time. Vincent pressed Elena closer, chest to back, their hands locked together. The wind still screamed through the torn rear panel, but she was safe, for now. His body became the wall between her and the endless sky. He took a deep breath. Calm, measured, focused. Everything depended on precision. Panic would kill them faster than the storm outside. Vincent shifted his weight, bracing his boots against the floor, adjusting his stance with micro-movements that countered every tilt, every sway, every pull of the wind. Elena pressed herself into him instinctively. Her face was against his chest, her hair tangled from the gusts. But she felt the solid anchor of his body beneath her. One hand held hers. One arm circled her waist, drawing her fully into his center. The jet pitched again, a violent lurch that made her stomach rise, but Vincent reacted instantly. He leaned into the motion, counterbalancing with his entire body, muscles coiling and releasing in perfect rhythm. His eyes scanned the cabin, taking note of every small fracture, every groaning seam, every panel on the edge of collapse. The rear panel threatened to twist further, but he ignored it. He would deal with the storm outside when they had the chance. Right now she was everything. Her life, her safety, her trust, all in his hands. The wind howled, the cabin shook. But Vincent found a rhythm. He shifted, pivoted, moved as one with the jet. Each motion countered the next. Each tilt neutralized before it could destabilize them. Elena clung to him, silent, heart hammering against his chest. Her breath was ragged but steadying. Slowly, carefully, the immediate chaos became manageable. He adjusted the small table, moving it to a safer position, steadying it against the floor with his knee. Loose panels rattled less violently as he used his weight to absorb their motion. The air still screamed through the torn panel, but it no longer threatened to sweep her away. Vincent's jaw clenched, focused, determined. Every ounce of energy went into stabilizing them. He could feel the subtle flex of the metal, the way the cabin's frame shifted under stress, and he countered it with precise movements, small shifts that no one outside would notice but made all the difference. Elena's hand squeezed his, not asking, not pleading. A silent acknowledgement of the tether that held them both together. Her trust radiated like warmth against his chest, grounding him, reminding him why he refused to falter. Another tilt, less violent this time. The jet groaned but did not twist violently. Vincent adjusted seamlessly, leaning into the shift, redistributing their weight. Slowly, carefully, he eased them toward a safer position, further from the open panel, further from the void. Outside, the clouds churned, white and gray streaking violently past. The sky remained beautiful, but merciless. Inside, the storm had been tamed, not completely, but enough. Enough for them to breathe. Enough for Vincent to hold her upright. Enough to remind them both that survival was still in their hands. Elena pressed closer, cheek against his chest. No words passed between them. She didn't need to speak. Her heart beat, fast and ragged, synchronized with his own. His steady presence, the strength coiled in his body, reassured her. Vincent exhaled slowly, releasing tension without loosening his hold. One hand still locked with hers, one arm still around her waist. She was safe, alive, and tethered to him. The jet continued to groan under stress, but Vincent had found the rhythm, the balance, the fragile center between chaos and control. He held her, and that was enough. In the center of the storm, amid the violent winds and the torn metal, one truth remained. Unshakable, he would never let her fall. And for Elena, that was more than survival. That was everything. The jet finally leveled. Slowly, trembling slightly under the strain, but no longer threatening to rip them into the endless sky. The violent sway, the deafening wind, the screaming metal, all of it, began to recede, leaving only the hum of the engines and the sound of their breathing. Vincent pressed Elena firmly to him, chest to back, his hands still locked around hers. She felt the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. Her fingers trembled, slightly, but the terror that had gripped her moments ago had begun to fade. He exhaled slowly, letting a fraction of tension leave his body, though his hold never loosened. Not completely, never completely. One tether still bound them together, one promise he would never break. Elena tilted her head slightly, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, the calm in his arms, the absolute certainty of his presence. For the first time since the storm had begun, she allowed herself to breathe. Not deep yet, but enough. Enough to know she had survived. The torn rear panel groaned one final time, settling against the cabin wall. The wind was still audible, but it no longer clawed at them. The threat had not vanished entirely, but Vincent had won the battle. He had stabilized the chaos, and in doing so, he had kept her alive. Elena's fingers flexed in his grip. She did not speak. She did not need to. He could feel the shift in her weight, the subtle relaxation in her body. She trusted him completely, without question, without hesitation. That trust, that surrender, was more intimate than any words could express. Vincent shifted slightly, adjusting their position to a safer spot in the cabin. He kept one arm around her, the other still holding her hand. He let her lean fully against him, cheek resting on his chest, as if she could anchor herself to the only constant in the chaos. The storm outside began to fade slowly, clouds parting into streaks of blue and white. The sky remained merciless, endless, but inside the jet, the danger had passed. The immediacy of death no longer pressed against their skin. They were safe, alive, together. Elena lifted her head slightly, looking up at him. His dark eyes met hers, and in that silent gaze, she saw the promise he had made without words, that he would not let go, that he would hold her, protect her, tether her to life as long as he could breathe. Her lips parted slightly, a whisper, almost lost amidst the hum of the engines. "Thank you," she breathed. Vincent's jaw softened, a brief shadow of a smile crossing his face. No words were necessary. The hand he kept locked with hers said everything that words could not. Protection, power, possession, love. They stayed like that for a long moment. The jet steady now, humming with life, a fragile vessel of survival. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, indifferent and beautiful. Inside, Vincent and Elena had survived the impossible together. He pressed a gentle kiss to the crown of her head, and she leaned into it, closing her eyes. The fear that had gripped her heart melted, replaced by a raw, undeniable bond. She knew, without question, that she would never be alone in the storms of life. Vincent held her tighter, one last time, feeling her pulse slow, matching the rhythm of his own. The storm outside might rage again, the world might try to tear them apart, but in this small, fragile space, nothing could reach them. Not while he was here. The private jet hummed steadily, carrying them forward. But more than that, it carried something else. A promise. A bond forged in chaos, sealed in survival, strengthened by the certainty that one life depended entirely on the other. Vincent pressed his cheek to hers. One tether, one heartbeat, one promise. And for Elena, that was everything. They were alive. They were together. And in the endless sky, nothing else mattered. The storm had passed. The wind still whispered through the small tear in the rear panel, but it was no longer a threat. Outside, the clouds drifted slowly, indifferent and calm, the endless blue sky stretching out in every direction. Inside the jet, there was quiet, a fragile, precious quiet. Vincent's arms remained around Elena, chest to back, shoulder pressed against hers, fingers intertwined. He did not release her. He could not. Not yet. She was alive, safe, and he had survived the impossible to keep her that way. Elena's breathing had slowed, though it was still uneven, her chest rising and falling against his. She pressed her cheek to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her ear. Every beat was a reminder that she was tethered to life, to him, and that the chaos outside had not claimed her. Vincent. Her voice was soft, barely audible. She didn't need to speak it aloud. Her body, her trembling fingers, the way she pressed herself closer, everything said it. Gratitude, relief, trust. Fear transformed into something deeper, something undeniable. He tightened his grip slightly, a subtle reminder, a silent reassurance. No words were necessary. One glance, one touch, and everything was understood. He had been her anchor in the storm. He had been her shield. He had been her tether to life. The jet hummed steadily now, the engines calm, carrying them forward. Panels still rattled, slightly, and the tier in the rear panel flapped with the residual wind. But the danger had passed. Vincent's eyes swept over the cabin, noting every detail, every fracture, but it no longer mattered. Survival was no longer a fight. They had survived. Elena lifted her head slightly, looking up at him. The terror in her eyes had faded, replaced by awe and an unspoken vulnerability. She had faced the void. She had been inches from it, and he had held her life in his hands. Her voice faltered. emotions catching in her throat. She let it go, letting the silence carry, the weight. Her fingers flexed slightly in his, a silent acknowledgement of what had just happened. Vincent's jaw relaxed, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough for a fraction of a second. His eyes softened as they met hers, dark, intense, unyielding, but tempered with the relief of survival. The world outside remained indifferent, but here, in the quiet after the storm, something else existed. Protection, power, love. He pressed a brief kiss to her temple. She leaned into it, closing her eyes, her body relaxing, fully against his. She had been terrified. She had been suspended over the void. And yet here, she was alive, tethered, safe. And it was all because of him. The storm outside was gone, but the storm within them, the bond forged in chaos, the trust, earned through survival, remained. Elena pressed her forehead to his chest. "I trust you," she whispered. Though the words felt almost too small for what she meant, Vincent pressed his cheek to hers. "Always," he murmured, low, unshakable. "No one else. No one ever." The private jet hummed forward, steady, carrying them through the endless sky. Outside, the world stretched on, indifferent. Inside, they had found something rare and absolute. Connection, born in danger, trust forged in chaos, and a promise that could never be broken. Vincent's hands held her tighter, one final anchor, one final tether, one final reminder that she was safe. And Elena, for the first time since the storm began, allowed herself to believe it completely. They were alive, together, and in the endless sky, the storm had created something stronger than fear. It had created them. The jet hummed steadily now, cutting through the clouds with quiet determination. The storm had passed. The rear panel still bore its damage, the flap of torn metal echoing faintly in the cabin. But inside, all that mattered was them. Vincent held Elena close, chest to back, shoulder pressed against hers. His hands were locked. On hers, a tether that had survived wind, metal, and gravity itself. She was alive. She was safe, and he had not let go. Elena pressed herself fully into him, cheek resting against his chest. Her fingers flexed in his grip, a quiet confirmation that she trusted him. Completely, utterly, without reservation. Every tremor, every gasp, every shiver that had once betrayed her fear was gone, replaced by the steady warmth of being anchored, tethered, protected. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words would have been meaningless. The silence carried everything. The terror, the relief, the trust, and the bond that had been forged in the heart of chaos. Outside, the world was indifferent. The sky stretched endlessly, white clouds drifting across the blue expanse. But inside, the world had narrowed to two hearts, two bodies, two lives bound, together by survival. Vincent's jaw relaxed slightly. His dark eyes, intense and unwavering, scanned her face. He felt every heartbeat, every breath, every tremble that remained. His fingers tightened subtly, a silent reminder, I am here. I will not let go. I never will. Elena lifted her head slowly, meeting his gaze. In her eyes there was awe, gratitude, and a quiet vulnerability that only he had ever earned. She had been inches from the void, from nothingness, and he had held her life in his hands. Her voice was a whisper, fragile yet steady. She didn't need to finish the sentence. He knew. He always knew. Vincent lowered his forehead to hers, breathing in the faint scent of her hair, the warmth of her presence. Always, he murmured. Low, firm, absolute. No exceptions, no hesitation. They remained pressed together, swaying subtly with the remnants of the jet's movement. Outside, the world remained vast, indifferent, and untamed. Inside, a different force ruled, the bond born in chaos, tempered by fear, solidified in survival. Elena's lips brushed against his chest in a fleeting, tentative kiss. Not for passion. Not yet. For gratitude. For trust. For the reassurance that he was real. That he had been there. That he had not let go. Vincent responded with a gentle pressure of his lips against her temple, a promise that was louder than any words could ever be. Protection. Possession. Love. One life tethered to another. Unbroken. The engines hummed steadily now. The cabin lights flickered softly, casting shadows that danced across their faces. Every sound, every motion, was a reminder that they had survived, the impossible together, that life had tested them and they had endured. Elena pressed herself against him again, her fingers curling around his. She felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, the warmth of his body anchoring her in a world that had almost ripped her away. Vincent's hands held her tighter, a final, absolute anchor. She leaned in closer, eyes closing, trusting entirely. The storm had ended. The danger had passed. And yet the bond remained, unshakable, unbroken, eternal. One tether, one heartbeat, one promise. They were alive, together, unstoppable. And in the endless sky, nothing else mattered. The jet moved forward steadily, carrying them away from the chaos, toward something new. But inside the cabin, one truth remained. The storm had tried to tear them apart. The sky had tried to claim her. And Vincent Moretti had not let go. Not then, not ever. Elena's lips pressed against his chest one last time, her heartbeat finally slowing. She was safe. She was his. And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed that nothing could ever take that away. And just like Vincent held Elena through the storm, there are moments in life we can't face, alone. Stories of love, danger, and the ties that keep us together. They remind us why every heartbeat matters. If this journey gripped your heart, if you felt the tension, the fear, and the unbreakable bond between them, don't let it end here. Subscribe now and stay with us for more stories where love battles fate, where passion meets danger, and where every second keeps you on the edge of your seat. Hit that bell and be part of every heartbeat, every storm, and every promise that unfolds in the stories to come. Because some bonds are too powerful to forget. Subscribe, stay with us, and never miss a story that tugs at your soul.